The dust-laden wind carried the scent of sage and blood as Sarah Dawson spotted the figure slumped against the dappled gray stallion. Her heart quickened not from fear, but from something deeper, a calling she couldn't yet name. The stranger's hat had fallen to the ground, revealing sun-bronzed features contorted in pain. His breathing labored as he clutched his thigh. New Mexico Territory, 1875. The land was unforgiving to those who didn't respect its harsh ways, and Sarah had seen enough death in her 22 years to last several lifetimes. But something about this wounded cowboy made her urge her Palomino mare forward rather than retreat. "Mr." She called, approaching cautiously, her medical bag secured to her saddle. As the daughter of the only doctor in Albuquerque, she'd learned to assess injuries quickly. "You're bleeding." The man's eyes, startlingly blue against his weathered face, flickered open. He was young, perhaps 25, but with the hard-earned lines of someone who'd faced the elements daily. "Can't feel my leg," he managed through gritted teeth, a streak of crimson staining his dusty denim trousers. Sarah dismounted in one fluid motion, her calico skirts swirling around her boots. "You will," she said with quiet confidence, already kneeling beside him. "I'm Sarah Dawson. My father's the doctor in Albuquerque." "Preston Oakley," he replied, wincing as she gently examined the wound. "Got ambushed 3 miles back." Sarah's skilled fingers found the bullet still lodged in his thigh. "It needs to come out. Can you ride?" She glanced at the sky, calculating the daylight remaining. "My father's clinic is too far, but my cabin's just over that ridge." Preston attempted to stand, only to collapse back against his horse. The massive gray stallion remained steady, seemingly protective of its master. "Storm here will follow your lead," he said, patting the horse's flank weakly. "He's smarter than most men I know." With tremendous effort, Sarah helped Preston onto Storm's back where he lay across the saddle, face contorted. "Hold on, Mr. Oakley. I'm not letting you die today." "Most folks just call me Oakley," he mumbled, consciousness slipping, "or Preston if they're fixing to shoot me." "Well, I'm not planning to shoot you," Sarah replied, mounting her Palomino, "but I am planning to dig a bullet out of your leg so you might wish I had." The ride to Sarah's modest cabin took just under half an hour, with Preston drifting in and out of consciousness. She spoke continuously, her voice low and steady, determined to keep him awake. The cabin, built by her own hands after her mother's death 3 years prior, stood isolated against the backdrop of the Sandia Mountains, offering Sarah the solitude she craved while remaining close enough to assist her father when needed. As they arrived, Sarah whistled for her ranch hand Miguel, who emerged from the small stable. "Señorita Dawson, what happened?" he asked, rushing to help lower Preston from the saddle. "Ambush, bullet wound," Sarah replied tersely. "Help me get him inside." Between them, they managed to half-carry, half-drag Preston's substantial frame into the cabin and onto Sarah's bed. The wounded cowboy groaned as they laid him down, his eyes fluttering open momentarily. "Got to warn," he began before losing consciousness again. "Miguel, fetch my surgical kit from the chest, then boil water," Sarah instructed, cutting away Preston's blood-soaked pant leg with practiced efficiency. "And bring the whiskey." The wound was ugly but not fatal if treated properly. The bullet had missed the major artery but remained lodged against the bone. Infection would be her main concern now. Miguel returned with the requested items, his weathered face grim as he assessed the situation. "This one important, señorita, or just another drifter?" Sarah dipped her hands in the hot water, scrubbing vigorously. "Every life is important, Miguel. You know that. But not every man brings trouble to your door." He nodded toward Preston's holster, where an impressive Colt revolver rested alongside a silver badge partially hidden by his vest. Sarah paused, gently lifting the badge to examine it. "U.S. Marshal," she read aloud, surprise evident in her voice. "Well, Miguel, it seems we have law enforcement in our care." "All the more reason to worry, señorita. Marshals collect enemies like horses collect flies." Sarah couldn't argue with that logic, but her focus remained on saving the man before her. Go tend the horses, then check the perimeter if anyone followed us. They will regret it, Miguel finished, patting the rifle always within his reach. I watch, you heal. Alone with the unconscious Marshal, Sarah set to work extracting the bullet. It was painstaking, delicate work, made more challenging when Preston regained consciousness midway through the procedure, nearly bucking off the bed in agony. Hold still. Sarah commanded, pressing him down with surprising strength. I've almost got it. Preston's eyes locked with hers, wild with pain. Talk to me, he gasped. Anything, just distract me. Sarah continued working as she spoke. I was born here in the territory, back when most folks were still afraid to settle. My father came west after the war, bringing my mother and me. He was the first proper doctor for 100 miles. The bullet shifted under her probing, and Preston hissed in pain. My mother died of tuberculosis 3 years ago, ironic for the doctor's wife. I'm sorry, Preston managed, sweat beading on his forehead. Almost there, Sarah murmured, finally extracting the lead bullet with a triumphant exhalation. Got it. Preston released a shuddering breath, his body going limp with relief. Thank you, he whispered, his voice raw. Sarah cleaned the wound thoroughly before applying a poultice of herbs and bandaging his thigh. The bullet's out, but you've lost blood and the real fight is just beginning. Infection could still take you if you're not careful. Been told I'm too stubborn to die, Preston replied weakly, his eyes already drifting closed. We'll see about that, Sarah said, covering him with a quilt her mother had made. Rest now, I'll be here. As Preston slept, Sarah settled into the chair beside the bed, her medical journal open on her lap. She documented the procedure in precise detail, occasionally glancing at her patient's face. In repose, the hard lines softened, revealing a handsome man beneath the grime and pain. She wondered what had brought a U.S. Marshal to this remote stretch of territory and, more importantly, who had shot him. Sarah must have dozed off because she woke with a start as the door creaked open. Miguel entered, carrying a tray of food. Any trouble? She asked, straightening in her chair. Quiet as a church mouse, Miguel replied. How is our lawman? Fever's starting, but that's to be expected. Sarah accepted the bowl of stew gratefully. Did you check his saddlebags? Miguel nodded. Papers, some ammunition, wanted posters. He hesitated. And a letter addressed to the Marshal's office in Santa Fe, sealed. Sarah frowned. We shouldn't, I did not open it, Miguel assured her, but there is something else. He placed a small leather-bound book on the table. A journal. The first page has names, people in Albuquerque. Sarah's curiosity piqued. What kind of names? Important ones, the mayor, the banker, the new railroad man. Miguel's expression darkened. And your father's name, señorita? Sarah nearly dropped her spoon. My father, why would a groan from the bed interrupted her question. Preston was awake, his blue eyes clouded with fever but alert enough to register their conversation. What time is it? He asked hoarsely. Just past midnight, Sarah replied, moving to check his bandages. How's the pain? Tolerable, he lied, the tightness around his eyes betraying him. I need to get to Albuquerque by tomorrow. Sarah snorted. The only place you're going is deeper into that bed. You try to ride with that leg and you'll be dead before you reach town. Preston attempted to sit up, grimacing. People will die if I don't. And you'll certainly die if you do, Sarah countered firmly, pushing him back down. Whatever warning you're carrying can wait another day. It can't, Preston insisted, his voice gaining strength despite his weakened state. There's a conspiracy. Corrupt officials planning to murder witnesses in a federal investigation. Your father is one of those witnesses. Sarah felt the blood drain from her face. What? That's impossible. My father is a doctor, not, he treated a man named James Blackstone last month, Preston interrupted. A man who was supposedly killed in a mining accident but was actually shot by Sheriff Cole Williams. Your father removed the bullet and recognized it came from the sheriff's gun. Sarah remembered the patient a miner brought in late one night, her father unusually secretive about the circumstances. How do you know this? Because your father sent a letter to the federal marshal's office, Preston explained, wincing as he shifted. I was dispatched to escort him and 3 other witnesses to testify before a judge in Santa Fe, but someone leaked the plan. I was ambushed on my way here. Miguel, who had been listening intently, muttered a curse in Spanish. The mayor's men. They have been watching the doctor's office for days. I thought it strange. Sarah's mind raced. If Preston was telling the truth, her father was in imminent danger. Miguel, ride to town at first light. Warn my father discreetly. Preston shook his head weakly. It's too dangerous. They'll be watching for anyone connected to your father or me. Then what do you suggest? Sarah demanded, fear making her voice sharp. I can't sit here while my father is threatened. Preston's fevered eyes held hers. We need to get word to my partner. He's stationed in Las Lunas waiting for my signal. He attempted to rise again, only to fall back with a groan of frustration. Damn this leg, I'll go, Sarah decided suddenly. I can ride to Las Lunas, find your partner, and be back by tomorrow night. Absolutely not, Preston and Miguel said in unison. Sarah stood, hands on her hips. I wasn't asking permission. Miguel can stay here to protect you and I can travel faster alone. Besides, no one would suspect me. It's 30 miles through Apache territory, Preston argued. I've made the journey before, Sarah countered. And I speak enough Apache to avoid trouble. More importantly, I know a route that shaves off 10 miles from the main road. Preston studied her determined expression, clearly weighing his limited options. My partner's name is Marshal Daniel Rivera. He's staying at the Wayfarers Inn in Las Lunas. He hesitated before adding, if you're determined to do this, you should leave tonight, under cover of darkness. Miguel protested vehemently, but Sarah was already gathering supplies, her mind made up. Within 30 minutes, she had changed into riding clothes, packed provisions, and strapped her father's old army revolver to her hip. If I'm not back by tomorrow sunset, get my father and flee north to the Colorado territory, she instructed Miguel as she mounted her palomino. Preston, don't you dare die while I'm gone. I didn't dig that bullet out for nothing. The marshal managed a weak smile. I'll be here and Sarah. His expression turned solemn. Be careful. These men don't care who gets hurt. They've killed women before. With a nod of acknowledgement, Sarah urged her horse forward, disappearing into the darkness. The night air was cool against her face as she rode, stars overhead guiding her path. She followed game trails and dry creek beds, places she'd explored countless times since childhood. The journey was tense but uneventful until dawn broke over the eastern horizon. Sarah had made good time, already spotting the distant church spire of Las Lunas. She paused at a stream to water her horse and refresh herself, the weariness of the night's ride settling into her bones. A twig snapped nearby, causing her to freeze. Her hand moved instinctively to her revolver as 3 riders emerged from the brush, 2 rough-looking men and a woman, all armed and watching her with calculating eyes. Well, well, drawled the lead rider, a scar-faced man with a pockmarked complexion. What brings a pretty thing like you out so early without an escort? Sarah kept her expression neutral, her grip tight on her weapon. Just passing through. My husband's expecting me in Las Lunas. The scarred man exchanged glances with his companions. Funny coincidence. We're headed there ourselves. Maybe we should ride together, for safety. I appreciate the offer, but I prefer to ride alone, Sarah replied evenly, tension coiling in her stomach. The woman rider edged her mount forward. That's a mighty fine medical bag you've got there, you a nurse. Sarah cursed inwardly. Her father's medical bag was still attached to her saddle. Midwife, she lied smoothly, on my way to deliver the blacksmith's baby. Strange, the woman mused. I heard the blacksmith in Las Lunas ain't married. Sarah knew then that these were no ordinary travelers. They had been watching for her, or at least for anyone connected to Preston's mission. Look, the scarred man said, his false friendliness evaporating, we know you treated a lawman last night. Where is he? Sarah calculated her odds. 3 armed opponents, open terrain, her horse already tired from the night's journey. Not good. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, slowly backing her horse toward the stream. I haven't seen any lawmen. The third rider, silent until now, drew his pistol. Search her bags, he ordered. If she's the doctor's daughter, she'll have proof. Sarah knew she couldn't outrun them, and fighting was suicide. Her only chance was to reach Las Lunas and find Marshal Rivera. With a sudden movement, she dug her heels into her palomino's sides, spurring the horse directly through the shallow stream, splashing water into the faces of the surprised riders. Gunshots exploded behind her as she galloped away, one bullet whistling past her ear. Her heart hammered in her chest as she urged her horse to greater speed, praying the animal's stamina would outlast their pursuers. The chase continued for nearly 2 miles before Sarah spotted Salvation, a patrol of territorial militia on the road ahead. The sight of uniformed men caused her pursuers to veer off into the brush. Disappearing as quickly as they had appeared, Sarah approached the patrol, breathless and shaking. I need to reach Las Lunas immediately, she told the lieutenant in charge. It's a matter of life and death. With the militia's escort, Sarah arrived in Las Lunas without further incident. The Wayfarers Inn was a modest 2-story establishment on the town's main street, already bustling with morning activity. I'm looking for Marshal Daniel Rivera, she told the innkeeper, acutely aware of how disheveled she must appear after her night ride and escape. The innkeeper, a portly man with suspicious eyes, looked her up and down. Don't know anyone by that name. Sarah fought rising panic. Please, it's urgent. I have a message from Marshal Preston Oakley. At Preston's name, the innkeeper's demeanor shifted subtly. Wait here, he muttered before disappearing into a back room. Moments later, a tall, broad-shouldered man with a neatly trimmed mustache emerged. His observant eyes took in Sarah's appearance, lingering on the medical bag and the dust covering her riding clothes. I'm Rivera, he said quietly. Follow me. In a private upstairs room, Sarah quickly relayed everything, finding Preston wounded, his warning about the conspiracy, and the ambush she'd encountered on the road. Rivera listened intently, occasionally making notes. Oakley suspected a leak in the marshal's office, he confirmed when she finished. That's why we split up. If they found him, they know about the witnesses. My father is one of them, Sarah reminded him anxiously. We need to get to Albuquerque immediately. We will, Rivera assured her, checking his weapons with practiced efficiency. But not by the main road. They'll be watching for us now. Within an hour, Sarah found herself riding alongside Rivera and 4 deputies he'd quietly assembled, all dressed as ordinary travelers. They took a circuitous route through the foothills, avoiding the established trails where ambushes might be set. How did you come to be a doctor? Rivera asked during a brief rest, clearly trying to distract Sarah from her worry. I'm not officially a doctor, she admitted. Women can't attend medical school, but my father taught me everything he knows. I've been assisting him since I was 12. Rivera nodded appreciatively. Oakley's lucky you found him. Not many would stop for a stranger bleeding on the trail. I couldn't ride past someone in need, Sarah said simply. And what about you? How does one become a U.S. Marshal in these territories? By surviving the war, Rivera replied, his expression momentarily distant. And by believing that law means something, even out here. He turned to her with unexpected intensity. Your father is a brave man, testifying against the most powerful men in the county. Not many have that courage. Sarah felt a surge of pride mixed with fear. I just hope we're not too late. They reached Sarah's cabin by mid-afternoon, finding Miguel standing guard outside, rifle ready. His relief at seeing Sarah was palpable, though it quickly turned to wariness at the sight of her companions. The Marshal? Sarah asked anxiously as she dismounted. Alive, Miguel confirmed. The fever broke this morning. He is weak but conscious. Inside, Sarah found Preston propped up against the headboard, pale but clear-eyed. His face brightened visibly when she entered, then turned serious when Rivera followed. You made it, Preston said, extending a hand to his partner. I was beginning to think, it takes more than a few hired guns to stop me, Rivera interrupted with a grim smile. How's the leg? Miss Dawson says I'll keep it thanks to her, Preston replied, his gaze lingering on Sarah. She saved my life. Sarah busied herself checking his bandages, uncomfortable with the gratitude in his eyes. The wound is clean, she reported. No infection, but you've lost blood and muscle damage will take time to heal. Time we don't have, Preston said grimly. They're moving the witnesses tomorrow, your father included, planning to ambush the transport and make it look like an Apache raid. Rivera cursed softly. How do you know this, Miguel? Preston explained. He rode into town at dawn, posing as a drunk. Overheard the sheriff's men talking in the saloon. Sarah's hands trembled slightly as she rebandaged Preston's leg. Then we need to get to my father now before they move him. It's not that simple, Rivera cautioned. They're watching the doctor's office. Anyone approaching will be seen. Not if we use the old mission tunnels, Sarah suggested suddenly. There's an underground passage connecting the mission to my father's clinic. It was used during the Apache raids years ago. Preston's eyes widened. You never mentioned this. I didn't trust you then, Sarah admitted. But now I do. The plan came together quickly. Rivera and 2 deputies would create a diversion on the outskirts of town, drawing attention away from the clinic. Meanwhile, Sarah would guide Preston and the other deputies through the tunnels to rescue her father and the other witnesses. You're not coming, Preston told Sarah firmly when she outlined her role. It's my father in danger, Sarah argued, and you can barely walk. You need me. Preston's jaw tightened, but he couldn't deny the truth of her words. Stay behind me at all times, he finally conceded. And if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments. As dusk fell, they set their plan in motion. Sarah helped Preston onto Storm, his injured leg heavily bandaged but functional enough for him to ride. The pain would be excruciating, but he refused laudanum, needing his wits about him. They approached Albuquerque from the south, using the cover of darkness. The old mission stood abandoned on the town's edge, its adobe walls crumbling with age and neglect. Sarah led them to a concealed entrance behind the altar, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. It's about half a mile, she whispered, lighting a small lantern. The tunnel opens into the storage cellar beneath my father's clinic. The underground passage was low and narrow, forcing them to proceed single file, hunched over. Preston's face was drawn with pain as he limped along, one hand braced against the earthen wall for support. Despite his condition, he insisted on taking the lead, his revolver ready. Above them, they heard the distant commotion of Rivera's diversion shouting and what sounded like gunfire. Sarah prayed it was merely for show and that no one was actually being hurt. The tunnel gradually widened as they approached the clinic, the earthen walls giving way to stone. Sarah pointed to a wooden ladder leading up to a trapdoor. That opens into the supply room, she whispered. My father should be in his quarters upstairs. Preston motioned for silence, listening intently before approaching the ladder. I'll go first, he insisted, despite Sarah's protest. If it's clear, I'll signal. With visible effort, he climbed the ladder one-handed, his injured leg dragging slightly. At the top, he pushed gently against the trapdoor, lifting it just enough to peer through. After a moment, he gestured for the others to follow. The supply room was dark and undisturbed, medicinal scents hanging in the air. Preston moved toward the door, his steps uneven but determined. Sarah stayed close behind him, worry for both her father and Preston making her heart race. They crept through the empty examination room toward the staircase leading to the living quarters. Suddenly, a floorboard creaked overhead. Someone was moving around upstairs. Preston signaled for the deputies to take positions while he and Sarah approached the stairs. Dr. Dawson. Preston called softly, "It's Marshal Oakley." Silence followed, then hurried footsteps. A door opened, and Sarah's father appeared at the top of the stairs, his silver hair disheveled and face lined with worry. His expression transformed to astonishment at the sight of his daughter. Sarah. Thank God, he breathed, rushing down to embrace her. When you didn't come to town, I feared the worst. We need to leave immediately, Preston interrupted the reunion. Is anyone else here? Dr. Dawson nodded grimly. 2 witnesses in the back room. The third was taken yesterday, they said, for his protection, but he didn't need to finish the thought. The tunnel, Sarah urged. We need to get everyone out before the front door of the clinic burst open with a splintering crash. Shots rang out as the deputies returned fire, creating a barrier between the intruders and the stairs. Go, shouted one deputy, taking a bullet in the shoulder but continuing to fire. We'll hold them off. Preston pushed Sarah and her father toward the supply room, limping heavily now as the strain reopened his wound. Blood darkened his bandages as they hurried the witnesses, a frightened shopkeeper and a railroad worker, down into the tunnel. What about your men? Sarah demanded as Preston struggled down the ladder last, nearly falling in his weakened state. They know to retreat to the rendezvous point if they can, Preston answered grimly, breathing heavily from exertion and pain. They moved as quickly as possible through the tunnel, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. By the time they emerged at the old mission, Rivera was waiting with horses. We need to keep moving, he urged as they mounted. The whole town's in an uproar, Doctor. Dawson helped Sarah get Preston onto Storm, the Marshal, now barely conscious from blood loss and exhaustion. He needs medical attention, the doctor said worriedly. The wound has reopened. My cabin, Sarah decided. It's defensible and I have supplies there. They rode hard through the night, taking a roundabout route to avoid pursuers. Dawn was breaking as they finally reached Sarah's cabin, where Miguel had prepared for their arrival, reinforcing windows and stockpiling ammunition. Preston was carried inside and laid once again on Sarah's bed, his face ashen. Sarah and her father worked side by side to repair the damage, restitching the wound and administering medication for both pain and infection. He's strong, Dr. Dawson assured his daughter, noticing her concern. And he has something to fight for. Sarah looked up sharply. What do you mean? Her father smiled knowingly. I've seen how he looks at you, Sarah, and how you look at him. He's my patient, Sarah protested weakly. For now, her father agreed, but I suspect he'll be much more given time. Before Sarah could respond, Rivera entered with grim news. Riders approaching from the south, at least a dozen. The next hours passed in a blur of preparation and tension. The witnesses were hidden in Sarah's root cellar while everyone else took defensive positions. Preston, despite Sarah's vehement objections, insisted on being propped by the window with his rifle. I won't lie helpless while others fight, he told her stubbornly. The attack, when it came, was swift and coordinated. Bullets splintered wood and shattered glass as the corrupt sheriff's men surrounded the cabin, demanding surrender. Send out the witnesses and no one else gets hurt, Sheriff Williams called from behind the cover of a large boulder. We both know that's a lie, Williams, Rivera shouted back. Those men will never reach Santa Fe alive if you take them. The firefight intensified, with Miguel proving himself a devastatingly accurate shot, picking off 3 attackers in quick succession. Sarah's father, despite being a healer by profession, demonstrated that his army marksmanship remained undiminished by time. Sarah herself moved between the defenders, bringing water, reloading weapons, and tending injuries. When a bullet grazed Rivera's temple, she was there immediately, stanching the bleeding and binding the wound while he continued to fire one-handed. Preston, pale but determined, maintained his position by the window, each shot carefully placed despite his weakened condition. We can't hold them off forever, he muttered to Sarah as she checked his bandages. Ammunition's running low. As if in answer to their predicament, the distant sound of hoofbeats approached from the east, many horses moving fast. For one terrible moment, Sarah thought reinforcements had arrived for the attackers. Then she heard the distinctive war cries. Apache, Miguel shouted, his tone more relieved than alarmed. A band of Apache warriors swept down from the ridge, led by a figure Sarah recognized: Nako, son of the local chief and a man whose family Sarah's father had treated during a smallpox outbreak the previous year. The Apache force hit the sheriff's men from behind, creating chaos and confusion. The battle ended quickly after that, with most of the attackers fleeing or surrendering. Sheriff Williams, attempting to escape on horseback, was brought down by a single shot from Preston's rifle, not fatal, but enough to ensure he would face justice. As the dust settled, Nako approached the cabin, raising his hand in greeting. "The debt to the healing woman and her father is repaid," he said simply. Dr. Dawson stepped forward, bowing his head respectfully. "We are grateful, my friend. Your arrival saved many lives today." With the immediate danger past, attention turned to the wounded. Sarah worked alongside her father, treating injuries among both their defenders and their captured attackers. Preston, having finally succumbed to exhaustion, slept deeply under the effects of laudanum. 2 days later, a federal judge arrived from Santa Fe with a substantial military escort. The testimonies were taken at Sarah's cabin, with Preston propped up but clear-eyed, providing key evidence linking the sheriff, mayor, and several other officials to a scheme involving land fraud and multiple murders. What happens now? Sarah asked Rivera as the judge prepared to depart with the prisoners and witnesses. "Justice, hopefully," Rivera replied. "These men will stand trial in Santa Fe. With the evidence we've gathered and the witnesses' testimonies, they should hang." And Preston? Sarah couldn't keep the concern from her voice. Rivera smiled knowingly. "He's requested a temporary assignment to Albuquerque once he's recovered. Says the territory needs a permanent marshal presence." That evening, Sarah found Preston sitting outside on her porch, his injured leg extended before him as he watched the sunset paint the mountains gold and crimson. She joined him silently, offering a cup of coffee which he accepted with a grateful smile. "Your father tells me I'll walk without a limp given time and exercise," Preston said after a comfortable silence. "He says I owe that to your skill with a scalpel." "You would have died out there if I hadn't found you," Sarah replied simply. Preston turned to face her, his blue eyes intense. "Why did you stop that day? Most folks would have ridden past a stranger bleeding on the trail." Sarah considered the question seriously. "I've never been able to turn away from someone in need. It's why I became a healer." "Is that the only reason?" Preston asked quietly. Sarah felt heat rise to her cheeks. "What other reason would there be?" Preston reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "I've been thinking about what you said when you found me. You told me about feeling my leg again." His thumb traced circles on her palm, sending unexpected shivers up her arm. "You were right about that. I'm wondering what else you might be right about." "Such as?" Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Such as whether a lawman with a dangerous job and not much to offer could possibly court a woman like you." Preston's gaze was unwavering despite the vulnerability in his words. "A woman who saved his life and somehow became the most important person in it." Sarah felt something unfurl in her chest, a warmth she'd kept carefully contained for years. "I suppose that would depend on the lawman," she said, a smile tugging at her lips. "And whether he planned to keep rushing into gunfights or if he might occasionally consider a quieter life." "I've been thinking a lot about quieter lives lately," Preston admitted. "About building something that lasts, something worth protecting." He hesitated before adding, "I've requested permanent assignment to Albuquerque. If you'd object to having me nearby, I could withdraw the request." In answer, Sarah leaned forward and pressed her lips gently to his. The kiss was brief but filled with promise, leaving them both breathless when she pulled away. "I don't object," she murmured. "In fact, I insist." Preston's smile was radiant as he tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Then I'd better heal quickly. I have courting to do and I aim to do it properly." Over the following months, Preston's recovery progressed steadily under Sarah's attentive care. True to his word, he courted her with a dedication that became the talk of Albuquerque, bringing wildflowers from the foothills. escorting her to church socials, and spending evenings on her porch discussing everything from literature to territorial politics. The trial in Santa Fe resulted in convictions for all the conspirators, with Sheriff Williams and Mayor Thornton sentenced to hang for their crimes. The remaining corrupt officials received lengthy prison terms, effectively dismantling the organization that had terrorized the region. Preston's permanent appointment as Albuquerque's Marshal brought a new era of stability to the town. He approached law enforcement differently than his predecessors, emphasizing justice over force and earning respect from settlers and native peoples alike. Sarah continued her medical practice alongside her father, their reputation growing as they treated patients regardless of background or ability to pay. With Dr. Dawson's blessing, she applied to a women's medical college in Philadelphia, receiving acceptance for the following year. "Will you wait for me?" Sarah asked Preston as they sat beneath the cottonwood tree near her cabin, her acceptance letter clutched in her hand. "It's 2 years of study." Preston took her hands in his. "Sarah Dawson, I would wait a lifetime if necessary, but I was hoping." He reached into his pocket, withdrawing a simple gold band. "I was hoping you might consider becoming Sarah Oakley before you leave. Then when you return as Dr. Oakley, I'll be here waiting." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes as she nodded, words momentarily beyond her. Preston slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into a tender kiss that held both passion and reverence. They were married that autumn in a ceremony that united the diverse elements of their community, Sarah's father performing the official duties, Miguel serving as Preston's best man, and Naco presenting the couple with a beautifully crafted Apache wedding blanket. 2 months later, Sarah departed for Philadelphia with Preston's promise to write daily and visit when his duties permitted. Their separation was difficult, but strengthened their commitment to building a future together, one that would combine her healing skills and his dedication to justice. When Sarah returned to Albuquerque in 1878, she arrived not only as a fully qualified physician, but also carrying another title mother to their infant son, Thomas, conceived during Preston's visit to Philadelphia the previous year. Preston met them at the station, his face alight with wonder as he held his son for the first time. "He has your eyes," he marveled, touching the baby's tiny hand with reverent fingers. "And your stubborn chin," Sarah replied with a laugh. "Dr. Sarah Oakley at your service, Marshal." "Welcome home, Doctor," Preston said, kissing her thoroughly despite the scandalized looks from proper town matrons on the platform. "I had the cabin expanded while you were away. Added a proper surgery on the east side and a nursery next to our bedroom." Together, they built the life they had envisioned, Sarah establishing a women's clinic while continuing to work with her father, Preston maintaining order in an increasingly civilized Albuquerque. They faced challenges, from outbreaks of disease to occasional flare-ups of violence in the still wild territory, but faced them together, their partnership strengthening with each obstacle overcome. 5 years after their wedding, as they sat on their expanded porch watching Thomas play with his 2-year-old brother James, Preston reached for Sarah's hand. "You ever think about that day," he asked, "when you found me bleeding against Storm?" Sarah smiled, her free hand resting on her swollen belly where their third child grew. "Sometimes, it seems like another lifetime. I couldn't feel my leg," Preston recalled, his thumb caressing the simple gold band on her finger. "And you told me I would." "I was right," Sarah said softly. Preston nodded, his eyes filled with emotion as he gazed at their children, their home, and finally at her. "About everything," he agreed, leaning forward to kiss her tenderly. "About absolutely everything." As the sun set over the Sandia Mountains, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, Sarah leaned against her husband's shoulder. From that chance encounter on a dusty trail to the life they'd built together, a family, a purpose, a love that had only deepened with time. She knew she'd been blessed beyond measure. Preston's arm tightened around her as if reading her thoughts. Not bad for a half-dead cowboy and the woman who saved him, he murmured against her hair. Sarah smiled, watching their sons chase fireflies in the gathering dusk. Not bad at all, she agreed, turning to kiss him with the same certainty she'd felt that first day when she'd promised him he would heal. And heal he had in ways neither of them could have imagined: his leg, his spirit, and his heart. Just as she had promised, just as she had known he would.